What happens to warships when they're no longer needed? Where do they go when they've reached the end of their service lives? Here, at the Puget Sound Naval Shipyard, near Bremerton, Washington, we can find some answers. This striking aerial photo from 2012 reveals 4 massive decommissioned carriers. Their armor-plated steel, flight decks, and superstructures sat here exposed to the elements for years. The USS Independence, Kitty Hawk, Constellation, and Ranger all sat next to each other in retirement. The ravages of time were apparent. These ships would have required a lengthy and expensive refit if they were to ever be deployed again. Instead, they have all since been scrapped. Eventually they were permanently struck from the inventory and sent to be sold as scrap metal. A shipbreaking yard in Brownsville, Texas was this foursome's final port of call. Here, the USS Ranger is towed out of Bremerton in 2015, after spending more than 2 decades in reserve. Here we fly to Brownsville, Texas, home to a firm that dismantles ships and recycles their steel. This is the Kitty Hawk, at the end of her final voyage, as she was towed up the Brownsville Ship Channel in 2022. Back at the Puget Sound facility, the USS Nimitz can be seen in recent satellite imagery, undergoing a periodic refit. The Navy has announced that the Nimitz's next deployment will be her last. She has now been scheduled for decommissioning in 2027. Here we see her departure from the maintenance dock, after the work was completed in March of 2025. The Nimitz-class carriers were built with an expected lifespan of 50 years, and are now being replaced over time by the Gerald R. Ford class. Leaving Bremerton, Washington, we now fly all the way across country to the Philadelphia Naval Shipyard. A number of ships in reserve status can be seen here. They are kept here for potential future reactivation. They're what the Navy refers to as retention assets, kept for a period of time in case they may be needed in a time of war. For now, these ships are managed by an office within the Naval Sea Systems Command, and are located at several inactive ship maintenance facilities. The level of readiness varies greatly, and depends on factors such as likely need, and congressional authorization of funds. Here in Philadelphia, at least 13 Oliver Hazard Perry-class frigates can be seen. Once the mainstay of the Cold War Navy, the Perry-class ships were ubiquitous on deployments and at ports of call all over the world. They performed a variety of roles during their extensive service record, including anti-submarine warfare, and as escorts for carriers. Also visible from satellite imagery are 2 large Ticonderoga-class guided missile cruisers. Large areas of rust are visible as these vessels age. It is doubtful many of these ships could be returned to service in a national emergency in a timely manner. Which raises the question, why keep spending limited resources to preserve the inactive force? Ultimately, the Navy has determined that given budget constraints, many of the ships will be permanently stricken over time. Most will be either sold for scrap metal or transferred to peaceful reuse as museums, training vessels, or artificial reefs. The Navy also uses some vessels for missile testing and live-fire exercises. Just a few hundred yards away from the frigates and cruisers in reserve, the USS John F. Kennedy could be seen in January of this year. She first entered service in 1968. After decommissioning, the carrier spent a decade here in Philadelphia, awaiting her fate. Her final departure brought out veterans who served on the ship. It was important for them to pay their respects and see her off properly.
It was a great experience, 71, 72, and 73. Michael was in supply. I was an aircraft carrier, parachute rigger. And
we met in the ship's library. Found out we had mutual friends and lived 5 miles from each other. And we've been friends for 52 years.
Yeah.
The Navy has a long history of storing a reserve fleet over the years. For many decades, ships were towed up river basins and grouped in protected moorings to keep them out of the path of coastal storms. Historic photos of these moorings give a hint as to just how vast the fleet was in earlier eras. Often referred to as the Mothball Fleet, the process of preserving an inactive ship so that one day it may be reactivated is expensive and time-consuming. Sensitive electronic equipment must be either winterized or removed and stored. And a regular schedule of maintenance must be carried out, if the ships are to ever be recommissioned in a time of war. Besides Bremerton and Philadelphia, a number of locations have served as storage for decommissioned vessels, including Norfolk Naval Shipyard, Sassoon Bay, the James River, and Beaumont, Texas. In addition, the U.S. Maritime Administration owns and operates a fleet of cargo vessels to support national security. These gray-colored ships of the Ready Reserve are strategically positioned in ports around the nation and provide sealift capability. Here we fly to the James River, and then on to Beaumont, Texas. Today, most of the cargo reserve are kept at various outports along the nation's coastlines. How does a nation decide what to keep in active service, what to put in reserve, and what to scrap? It's a question of national priorities for Pentagon planners and for members of Congress, who must strike a balance between capability and budget. As the U.S. Navy embarks on a new era of global strategy, budget pressures have led to a debate about what the proper force structure should be. Often on social media, or in comment threads, you'll see people ask the question, why have so many of the Navy's ships been made inactive? Blame the evolution of modern warfare, changes in technology, and cold hard budget realities. But first, a little history. Today, the United States Navy has a battle force of around 293 fighting ships. At the height of World War II, that number was a staggering 6,000, including about 2,000 amphibious landing ships. After the war, a dramatic drawdown was clearly necessary. By 1950, the active force was down to about 600. It was intended that some ships could later be recommissioned, particularly in an emergency, and on short notice. Some warships were sold to other navies around the world, often allied nations that could not afford to build their own. Examples of former U.S. Navy vessels can be found in many navies, including those of Mexico, Thailand, and Taiwan. The former USS Phoenix, a World War II-era Brooklyn-class cruiser, that had survived the Japanese attack on Pearl Harbor, was later sold to Argentina in 1951. Eventually renamed the General Belgrano, she would later see action in the Falklands Crisis of 1982, where she was sunk by the British Royal Navy. During the Cold War in the 1980s, Pentagon planners dreamed of building up to a 600-ship navy. While the 600-ship goal was never reached, this plan eventually led to the restoration of the World War II-era Iowa-class battleships, which had been taken in and out of service over the years. The 4 sleek battleships were completely restored, and given modern systems, including cruise missiles. Ultimately, these platforms proved to be larger and more expensive than was practical, and they were again decommissioned. Today, the USS Iowa is a museum ship located in San Pedro, California, and can be toured by visitors. In the years since the Cold War ended, the size of the Navy's fleet has been adjusted steadily downward. In 2018, the Navy looked into bringing back the Perry-class frigates. A study concluded that it would simply be too expensive. Even upgrading their capabilities, their usefulness would still be limited under modern conditions. Instead, the Navy is undertaking a plan to extend the service lives of its existing fleet, expecting to build up to an active force of 355 ships. The Navy hopes to reach that fleet size by the early 2030s. The current Arleigh Burke-class destroyers could see lifespans of 45 years, which would be 10 years beyond what was originally envisioned. The Navy also plans to eventually purchase up to 20 of the new Constellation-class frigates, although the program is now behind schedule. A debate continues about what the optimal size for the Navy's active force should be. The answer will have to be some compromise between capability and budget. In the era of guided missiles, unmanned drones, and electronic warfare, the role of ships in national defense will continue to evolve. While technological change and geopolitical forces have made many of the oldest platforms permanently obsolete, there's no question the Navy will continue to play a central role in the nation's defense. A new consensus across the political aisle has emerged about the importance of sea power to keep shipping lanes open, guaranteeing free trade, and supporting our allies. If you've served on any of the ships that have been decommissioned over the years, we would love to hear from you in the comments below. Tell us what you think the right size of the Navy should be. And if you like these short histories, be sure to hit the thumbs up button to let us know. Thanks for watching.